is up, fight fans? We are live on MMA Weekly, the most trusted source for news and entertainment in mixed martial arts for almost 20 years. It's UFC Fallout, powered by CBD Emporium, featuring Level Select CBD. Level Select CBD helps you stay in the fight. 3 levels for 3 different levels of pain. Level 1, Level 2, Level 3. Hey, I can count. I'm a math major, right? But I'll tell you what, I don't need to count to feel better. With Level Select CBD from CBD Emporium, those 3 levels bring you the relief you need, not just from pain, stress, anxiety, help you sleep better at night and feel every single day like you're at your best. And right now, we're going to give you that in a nice, neat little package just for you. 50% off at stayinthefight.mma.com by entering the code MMA50. 50% off with the code MMA50. Stay in the fight, MMA.com. CBD Emporium featuring Level Select CBD. Stay in the fight. I'm Jim Grieshaber along with Jeff Cain. I'll tell you what, guys, call me Gries, by the way. And on Sundays, call me Alive. I'm still alive. What an incredible week. 100-hour work week, 15 hours of shows, editing till my eyes are ready to pop out of my head. And I am energetic and ready to rock here today. Jeff Cain, I'll tell you what, I rewatched the main event from last night's fight card. I also rewatched Munoz and Rivera because I love that fight. And I have the same opinion of it as I did last night. We have a lot to talk about today, Jeff, on UFC Fallout. But we have to talk about how the heavyweight division has sort of cleared things up over these last few weeks. And, you know, new contenders at the top, some people slipping out of there. But Ciryl Gane, this just in, still won his fight last night over Jairzinho Rozenstruik, even though it wasn't pretty. I know you rewatched it, and I've been dying, as the viewers have, to hear your thoughts after watching it a second time, the second time around.
It wasn't any easier watching it the second time around than it was the first. It just wasn't a good fight. I mean, you know, it literally just wasn't a good fight. The first round, not a lot happened. You know, basically Gane landed a jab and then a takedown. In the second round, not a lot happened. And then there's people, you know, talking about how Gane put on a striking clinic. There were no combinations in that fight. I mean, in 25 minutes, I think I saw one combination. Everything was one shot by both fighters. It just wasn't a good fight. You know, Gane did win the fight, and there was no controversy about that. I mean, he definitely won every round, with the first round probably being the closest of the 5. But he didn't do a lot to show that he's ready for a title fight in that division and ready for those top guys. I feel like he got the win, but didn't, like I said, there wasn't any combinations. No one took any risk. No one got hurt. It was a sparring session. I think that Dana White's rightfully upset with both of their performances in that fight. And but at the end of the day, Gane remains undefeated, which is most important because that's his biggest selling point at this point is his undefeated record.
I was going to say, and Dana was halfway to Summerlin by the time the press conference was halfway over. Right? He just bailed out. He's like, fuck this, man. Peace. I'm out of here. And, you know, he wasn't happy. The UFC boss wasn't happy. And I'll be honest with you. I rewatched the fight too, Jeff. It was a snooze fest. Let's be real. It was a snooze fest. But the reason it was, and we think about Ciryl Gane, Rozenstruik had 10 knockouts in 11 pro fights leading into that one last night. The one that he didn't have the knockout was the one where Francis knocked him out in 20 seconds. And Gane knows this coming in. He knows that's why you saw no combinations from Ciryl Gane, because he knew the only way Rozenstruik could beat him is if he stayed in the pocket and got hit with one of those bombs that 10 people have already been hit with. So a smart fight by Ciryl Gane. First things first, you got to win. Everybody can talk about being exciting. You know what? There are different stages and different categories for fighters. If you're a fighter who knows you're not going to win a title, and most guys think they will, most girls think they will at some point, but if you're a fighter who doesn't have a lot to lose and you're just fighting to entertain the fans and you're fighting to go out there and make money off your brand and just be a professional fighter, then of course you're just going to go out there and let them rip and let them fly, and we love fighters like that. If you're a fighter who's looking to make your way toward a title shot and be at the top of a division, your objective changes. You just want to win the fight. Now, when you get a fighter who does both, like Conor McGregor when he was on his meteoric rise, for example, when you get a fighter who does both, that's when you get those superstars. But the number one objective for Ciryl Gane was to win, and he did just that. Because, you know, these fights have a way of working things out where certain fighters work their way out of title contention. But the one thing I will say after watching those fights again, and I want to tread carefully here because, you know, with age comes wisdom, and never having been a fighter myself, I don't want to sit here and say anything about the way a fighter performed because I've never done it myself. But I will say this. Jairzinho Rozenstruik fought his way, or should I say, didn't fight his way out of contention last night. There's no doubt. These last couple of weeks, there's been a lot of fallout in the heavyweight division. Yeah, I think Curtis Blades looked really good in his fight against Derek Lewis. So he's not out of title contention. He only dropped one spot in the rankings. He looked good in that fight, just got caught. But Alistair Overeem and Jairzinho Rozenstruik in these last 3 main events that were all heavyweights, Volkov, Overeem, Blades, Lewis, and then Rozenstruik, gone. Out of title contention. They're gone. Reem and Rozenstruik, gone. See ya. And that's, 2 out of the top 7 over these last 3 for Blade. And then you have Gane, Lewis, and Volkov, who did great and represented themselves very well.
Yeah, I mean, whenever Dana put that fight together, it was partially because of the rankings or the UFC matchmakers. I don't want to act like Dana's the matchmaker, but, he does have, at the end of the day, he kind of has veto power on matchmaking. Because Gane was undefeated and you expected him to fight like an undefeated fighter, a fighter that's never tasted defeat. And what I saw was a fighter trying to keep his undefeated record intact and not really move up in the division and just maintain where he is. That was not the performance of an undefeated fighter who doesn't know what a loss is like. He went out there as if he was, knew exactly what a loss was like and was doing everything in his power to make sure that he didn't put himself in any sort of danger throughout that fight to potentially lose that fight. And so, I understand Dana's frustration. That's the main event. You put guys in the main event that you expect to go out there and put on a performance. Now, I did see that Rozenstruik apologized to the fans. Look, I don't think any athlete needs to apologize to the fans for a performance. Maybe for something they've said or something they've done, but I don't think they all.
He didn't look like he wanted it, Jeff. He didn't look like he wanted it. He was not aggressive at all, man. All he did was counterpunch, and by the time he counterpunched, Gane was 3 feet away because he's so quick in and out. I mean, I thought Gane executed the game plan to perfection. Rozenstruik did not adjust, did not even try to get aggressive in that fight. All the action was initiated by Gane. Nothing from Rozenstruik at all. Nothing.
Well, outside of the first round, I'll agree with that. And in the first round, Rozenstruik did flurry 3 times. Didn't come up with anything, but he looked like, at the end of the first round, I was kind of like, okay, this could be a good fight. They fill each other out, slow process. Rozenstruik did flurry a few times, and he got taken down at the end of that round. And in the second round, Gane just didn't give you anything. It's hard to counter someone when they're just giving you one punch at a time. It's just you're jumping in with a jab and jumping back out, jumping in with a jab, jumping back out. It's hard to do anything. To be a counter striker. I agree that Rozenstruik didn't make any adjustments, but there wasn't hardly any adjustments to make because Gane was literally fighting the Anderson Silva versus whatever that fight was in Abu Dhabi that pissed.
But where was the aggressiveness from Rozenstruik though? So for example, when Francis fought Rozenstruik, he went right at him and just threw bombs from the opening, literally just boom, just throwing haymakers everywhere and caught him with one 20 seconds in. Rozenstruik is a headhunter. He's a killer. Where was that This guy's had over 80 kickboxing matches. Where the hell was that aggressiveness? After you realize that Gane's not going to be in the pocket, you're not going to get him with that counter. Where's that lead hook? Where is that? He fought last night just like he did against Overeem, where he got very lucky with 4 seconds left to get that one Hail Mary. And it was a Hail Mary because he lost that whole. He fought the same way last night against Gane as he did against Overeem. The guy is just not a title contender. Nothing wrong with that. He's going to make a lot of money for a bunch of years, knocking dudes out all over the place, just not the top guys.
Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, whenever I looked at that fight, Gane got 2 of 13 takedowns. Look, if you're going to take Rozenstruik down 2 of 13 attempts, man, I don't know how the hell you think you're going to do good against the top of that division. Even with people who aren't wrestlers. Like I said, I just didn't see anything in that fight other than Gane, who was just one shot, and then Rozenstruik, who couldn't put together a counter game because there wasn't anything to do, and then he didn't adjust, didn't get aggressive, and so we got a fight that was one, it's just one shot and done. It was one leg kick and done on both of the guys. It wasn't just Gane. Rozenstruik didn't put together any combinations either. He didn't rush in there with a crazy flurry or take any risks either. Which is what made that fight, I think, so frustrating, particularly for the organization, is because neither one of those guys took any risk at all in that fight to put themselves in danger, and also to put themselves into a situation where they stood out like Derek Lewis did, or stood out like Volkov did. And so we kind of got this fight where Gane maintained his undefeated record, and Rozenstruik's going to drop a few spots, but neither one of them showed me that they're at the top of that, ready for the top of that division. You know, I feel like.
Yeah, no, let's pick up on that. I want to pick up on that with you, because that's exactly, look, Derek Lewis did one thing right in that fight against Blades. Blades completely dominated the first round. Lewis did absolutely nothing. Wasn't really doing anything at all in the second round either, but he did connect with that one shot when Blades went for the takedown. So other than that, Lewis did nothing in that fight, but he didn't have to. He was waiting for that opportunity. It came, and he took advantage of it. It looked like Rozenstruik was doing the same thing. Now, for me to sit here and say that Gane dominated Rozenstruik, probably too strong of a word. He did completely control the fight. He did completely impose his will, and there was zero doubt as to who won every round. But to say dominate, I think would be too strong of a word. I will concede that. But you, after that performance last night, don't see Gane as a top contender, or you just need to see more? I want to get some clarification on that, because I view him as the closest at the top. And I think it literally Lewis, because of the power and the one-punch knockouts, is there. But the best fighters in that division, with Jones coming in, we talked about Jones and Stipe level here, and then the next level down, just like level select, there's level 1, Jones and Stipe. Level 2, to me, is Gane and Blades, and then maybe Lewis, for sure. And then level 3 is the Volkovs and, the Rozenstruiks and the guys down there. And that might not be fair to Volkov, but I don't see him as a title contender. So after that performance last night, Jeff, do you still need to see a lot more from Ciryl Gane before you're willing to put him up there?
Yeah. I mean, 100%. I felt like Overeem had more success wrestling Rozenstruik than Gane did. Gane scored a takedown at the end of the first round and at the end of the fifth round. I feel like Overeem did sort of dominate Rozenstruik until he got that big shot with 4 seconds left to go. I mean, I felt like because we're talking about the game plans basically exactly the same. So who implemented the game plan better? Well, I mean, you have to say Gane because he got the W. But when you look at those fights, Overeem did dominate Rozenstruik for 4 rounds. I mean, he really did. And then he got, his lips split wide open and sent into, unconscious land. But yeah, I've got to see a lot of things out of him, in my opinion. I got to see better takedown defense. I got to see a more of an urgency. I just got to see combinations too. I mean, he wasn't even setting up. And then I get what you're saying. I mean, he was doing that strategically, right? That's the game plan. His game plan is one shot, get out, one shot, get out, one shot, get out, and not give Rozenstruik anything to work with. That worked. But I don't think he proved anything, if that makes sense. He's still undefeated. He's still a marketable guy, and that's his biggest marketability. So Dana could complain, and the fans can complain, and I can complain all we want. At the end of the day, his next fight, he's still going to be undefeated Ciryl Gane, number 3 ranked heavyweight in the world. And so that is marketable. So the UFC has that going for him, and Dana will get over the performance. I don't think Gane's going to not get a matchup because of this performance. Dana got mad. He'll get over that in a couple of days. But I need to see more out of him as far as his skill set before I can say, man, I think he matches up great at the top of that division. I don't think he matches up great at the top of that division.
No, he doesn't right now. I mean, look, at the top of the division, I assume you mean Stipe and Jones, and I don't think anybody's on that level right now. And even Jones's tweet, and Dana agreed with it, was, hey, these guys are just dancing around. When daddy comes home, not going to fly. But when I look at the top of this division, Jeff, and I like what the Columinary said, never get Lewis beat Francis. I want to pick up on that in just a second. Noah's Ghost has said it perfectly in the chat right now. And guys, throw your thoughts up there right now in our chat right here. Hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, have some fun with us. But Noah's Ghost says, Gane is still a contender. Just learn the hard way what people expect from a main event guy. There's no way I could have said that any better. Good job, Noah's Ghost. That's exactly what happened in this fight. But I just want to say, Jeff, that when I look at what Ciryl Gane did, this guy's only been fighting 3 years. He got fast-tracked because he's a heavyweight. The division obviously is thinner than a lot of the other divisions. Ironic to call heavyweights thin, right? But you know what I'm saying. So the division being thin, you get fast-tracked. You've been fighting less than 3 years. Still completely raw, like a young Francis. Now, Gane's ground game better, and he's a Muay Thai guy, so different than Francis. Same coach, same gym, and Francis left after he lost to Stipe. But when I look at what Ciryl Gane was able to do, the number one objective is to get the win. The one thing you can't let Rozenstruik do is knock you out. And the only way he's going to knock you out is if you stay in the pocket. Now, to pick back up on what the Columinary said about Lewis and Ngannou, that literally, if you thought last night's main event was bad, Lewis and Ngannou, lest we forget, was one of the worst fights in the history of the UFC. I sat there, literally, I couldn't wait for that fight. I was so excited. I just literally, and then that was DC Stipe 1 when DC knocked out Stipe and Brock came in the octagon. You remember that card? That fight, Francis and Lewis, everyone's expecting someone's head to go flying. They did nothing for 3 rounds. And Francis, lost to Lewis. But at that point, that fight was a huge disappointment. And you sometimes, and Dana said it last night, Jeff, sometimes you get these fights in the heavyweight. It was a snooze fest. It was. You have to fight to keep your eyes open watching that fight. It wasn't a great. I get it, but Gane did what he had to do.
Yeah, but I kind of look at it as like that was an Indiana basketball game from the 50s where somebody won 7-2. In a basketball game.
Hoosiers.
I just, Bobby Knight had that stupid pass 57 times, and then we're going to score 1 time a half, and that's kind of what
like
I feel
the Dean
like.
Smith 4 corners, right? Yep.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I witnessed. Look, it's an effective strategy. I actually think that his coaches did put together a good game plan for their athlete to win a fight. I think, and I agree with what Ghost or commenter said. I think more than anything, Gane understands what the promotion expects out of you when they put you in a main event. Because there are other fights on that card that they could have made that main event. That wasn't a number 1 a title fight or eliminator or anything. It was the number 4 and 7 heavyweight. They could have put Rivera, the number 7 and 8 bantamweights in there. There were other people that could have been the main event. The UFC specifically went with that. I know, but they specifically went with that main event because on paper somebody's getting knocked out. And then when it played out in the cage, it just wasn't that way. Neither guy looked like they were really trying to knock the other guy out. Well, I think Rozenstruik got outclassed. I'll say that. And he got exposed. But when we're talking about these matchups, we're talking about Lewis and we're talking about Ngannou, and now we're talking about Rozenstruik. We're also talking about the 3 most one-dimensional fighters in the division. They just happen to be at the top because of their knockout prowess. But as far as well-rounded fighters go, those are probably the 3 least well-rounded fighters in the heavyweight division.
Who's the third one? Rozenstruik and
Ngannou,
and
Lewis,
Ngannou and who?
And
Lewis.
Rozenstruik.
Yeah, Lewis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Their game's the same. It's different. They're different people, but the game's the same. It's we're not going to shoot any takedowns. We're going to stand at distance and we're going to try to land a bomb and win this fight. So Gane did show that. Gane did show that I'm a little more well-rounded than these one-dimensional guys. And so, he didn't completely come out of there looking terrible. I don't want to act like, oh my God, that was the worst utter performance in my life that I've seen. Look, I've seen way worse fights than that.
Perfect
I've seen
execution.
way worse fights than that. Yeah.
Minus the takedowns, though. You did mention 2 out of 13. Like, he's got to do better on the takedowns for sure, especially against a guy like Rozenstruik, who's a kickboxer.
Yeah, and look, and like I said, we would have to interview him, Gane. That's what the stats said. I'm not sure Gane was trying to get all those takedowns as much as maybe just tie Rozenstruik up and wear him down a little bit and just keep him honest. But he did go for several takedowns that he didn't get. Yeah, like I said, I felt like it was not a spirited fight, if that makes sense, And like we said last night, maybe that's because we're spoiled as fight fans and journalists covering the sport or whatever we are. But I just felt like nobody took a risk. And at the end of the fight, no, there was no question that Gane won. I just don't know what he won, if that makes sense. I don't really know what he won other than his undefeated record's intact. But whenever the UFC is going to look at the top of that division on who's going to get the fight after Jones, Gane's not going to be in that conversation, because of that performance last night. He's not going to be.
No, he's probably going to have to win 2 more. I was doing the computations in my head this morning, trying to figure out what we're going to talk about on Fallout. And, the heavyweight division, Jeff, after all these events. Now, let me look back here real quick at the events. Just real quick, take a peek back at, so you had right before the pay-per-view, you had Overeem versus Volkov, right? And on that fight card, we saw Volkov completely dominate Alistair Overeem. And going into that fight, we were talking about Overeem wanting to make 1 more title run. Volkov looked great that night, completely put an end to any thought of Overeem being a champion before he retires. There's no shot in hell that's going to happen now, and that's okay. Overeem really wanted to add that UFC belt to his legendary career. Give him props, give him credit, but give Volkov all the credit in the world to say, hey, I'm right here at the top of the division. I keep getting better. and I want a title shot. And Volkov is definitely a guy who looked great that night. So first test passed was Volkov. First guy eliminated, Overeem. Then the week after Usman and Burns, you had Blades and Lewis, right? Well, Curtis Blades was great in the first round of that fight. He was in and out. He was throwing those leg kicks. He was smashing some elbows, even threw a flying knee. Very aggressive. Really just kind of forced the takedown in round 2 and got caught by Lewis. But Blades didn't hurt his stock all that much that night because anybody can get caught anytime. He was active. He was busy. He showed off all those tools. Would he like to have that takedown attempt back? Absolutely. But he was on his way to dominating Lewis and winning that fight. Lewis obviously caught him and finishes him. So Lewis obviously reasserts himself at the top of the division with the win. Blades doesn't fall far because he looked very good in that fight, and anybody can get caught by Lewis. Then you fast forward to last night, Rozenstruik and Gane. Rozenstruik now out of title contention. Gane gets a big win and a big leap forward, but not into title contention, Jeff, and I agree with you. And then real quick, I also want to add that Chris Daukaus and Tom Aspinall with big wins in that time, announcing themselves as potential contenders down the line, moving up in the rankings with those two performances. Aspinall beat Arlovsky and Daukaus beat who was it? What is wrong with whoever it was. My brain isn't working. It's Sunday. It's a long week. But long story short, Jeff, at the top of the division, when you look at Jones coming in to get the winner of Stipe and Francis, and when you look at the major contenders in that division, and I think, and Jamie, you're right, Gane versus Volkov. I said it last night. Gane and Volkov is the fight to make now, not Gane and Lewis. Gane and Lewis is going to give you a lot more of what you saw last night with Gane and Rozenstruik, because that's exactly what Gane will do against Derek Lewis. And I think Dana White knows that, and you're not going to see that. You're going to see Gane versus Volkov. Gane has to beat Volkov, and then he would have to win another fight against the Blades and Ngannou or someone else at the top of the division, to even get an opportunity, or Lewis. He would have to win 2 fights to get a title shot after what we saw last night. And that doesn't even count whether or not Jones and Gane, or Stipe and Ngannou have a rematch, or Jones fights Stipe or Ngannou and it's a great fight and they do a rematch. So Gane's 2, 3, maybe even 4 fights away from having a chance to win the belt.
Yeah, it's going to come down to what he looks like in his next fight. If he goes out there in his next fight and just face plants somebody, and has this great performance, then we all forget, and all of a sudden he's there and we're talking about him again. Look, Gane didn't hurt himself last night. Rozenstruik is going to drop to number 6 behind Volkov. He's out of title contention. Gane's on the cusp of right there. He's right there. And then Jones coming in is why he's really not in title contention right now. But he didn't hurt himself. He didn't drop down. He's still undefeated. He needs an impressive win in his next outing, or he's going to be 2 fights away. But if he goes out there in his next outing and just knocks out whoever it is, Volkov or Lewis or whoever, Blades or whoever the heck, however it shakes out, because we're in a weird world of matchmaking and people falling off cards and late replacements and all kinds of things going on. So who knows what's going to happen? But if Gane comes out in his next outing and puts in a good performance, an impressive performance, then I feel like he just erases last night and he's right there. So it's going to come down to his next fight. I don't think he hurt himself though. And like I said, Dana White's memory is sort of short when it comes to these things. That was right after the event. It's on ESPN. Well, you got sponsors, you've got contracts with the networks that you're trying to deal with. And look, Dana's, of course, he's not going to be happy with that, but he's going to get over that.
And the whole fight card was bad, Jeff. The whole fight card was just god awful comparatively to what we've seen lately to start the year. This one was, over. So that definitely contributes to Dana's mood. Only Rivera and Munoz was a great fight last night. There were some good performances, on the prelims and so forth, but overall, that entire fight card was a bit of a stinker in terms of fan interest and react. There were a lot of decisions, not really any finishes, and that's just something that, we got a little spoiled with what we've seen so far this year. But at the end of the night, and you're looking, someone in the chat, Emil says, what if Volkov would win against Gane? Volkov Gane is the fight to make, not Gane Lewis. Lewis has to wait in the wings now, because if they can't work things out with Jones, or if Izzy beats Jan Blachowicz and Jones decides to go back down to 205 to fight Izzy, which a lot of people would love to see that rather than Jones up at heavyweight. So maybe Ngannou beats Stipe, and instead of Jones, Stipe, GOAT versus GOAT, you have Francis sitting there. Jones fights Adesanya, and then you have the Lewis-Francis rematch for the belt, because Lewis has a win over Francis, even though no one won that fight. And I think some fights you should just be like, this bout has been scored a dud and no one wins. But literally, I think that at the end of the night, Gane didn't hurt himself. You're right, but he's no higher up than Volkov. He's in no better position title-wise than Volkov is right now, and he's the guy no one talks about. Nobody wants Volkov to be the champion. Nobody. Not the UFC, not anyone outside of Volkov's camp. And Gane hasn't shown that he can be that explosive champion. You want a guy like Francis to have the belt, knocking people's heads off. You want a guy like Francis Ngannou to be at the top like Derek Lewis. But Stipe is so good, and I think, and you and I agree on this, so much better as a fighter overall. Anyone can get caught anytime. Stipe is so much better than every other heavyweight. It's not even close, and that's why he's a 6-time champion. But nobody at the top of the division can even come close to his skill set, and I think the closest one is Curtis. But Blade of fighting, and I still think he's got a shot to be a title contender. Now I think Blades should fight Rozenstruik. I think that's the fight to make next. I would make Gane versus Volkov, Blades versus Rozenstruik, Lewis waiting in the wings in case Ngannou, or even if Stipe wins and Jones goes back to 205, then Lewis gets the winner of that fight.
Yeah, I mean, it gets complicated in the top of that division. I agree that Gane's not sitting anywhere closer to a title fight than Volkov is right now. And it's weird because whenever you talk about the top of that division, I agree with you. I think that Stipe, there's no holes in Stipe's game. There's no glaring thing where I'm going to fight Stipe and this is what I'm going to do. There just isn't one,
No.
Where with Lewis and Ngannou, there are. I want to take these guys down. I want to close the distance and get them in the clinch, wear them down, take them down, and fish them on the ground later in the fight. So that's the kind of game plan to fight a striker with ridiculous punching power, but not a lot of takedown defense and not a lot of ground skill. And so I agree with what you said about Blades. I think whenever you look at the well-roundedness of the fighters, you got Stipe, John Jones, Curtis Blades, and then you got Gane. Because while Gane maybe didn't show us everything that he had last night, he did show that he's not just a striker. He's not just a Muay Thai guy. He can close the distance. He can get in that clinch position, which is what Muay Thai people do. But from there, he can also get the fight to the ground. And he can stick to a game plan. There were pluses from Gane, in that fight, for sure. But he just didn't stand out any higher than the people around him. But, maybe that's not a bad deal because we're in a position now where the heavyweight division's kind of on hold and he has time. Because we're talking about Lewis is not going to get a fight right now because he has the win over Ngannou. The most terrible fight in the heavyweight division for years was that fight. But we forgot about that because on paper, he has a win over him. So the further we move away from this event, that's the way this win for Gane's going to be. It's fresh in our mind. And we're like, man, that wasn't a great fight. But 6 months from now, we're going to be like, well, Gane holds a win over Rozenstruik. He holds a win over this guy. And so at the end of the day, Gane bettered his position in the division. He just didn't get closer to a title fight. And we'll forget about this performance. We always do, man. We always do.
Yeah, what do you think about Blades Rozenstruik as the next one? I want to get your thought on that. I think you have to make that fight.
I would make that fight, and if I were Curtis Blades, I'd jump all over that. That's what
I would be texting Dana.
Yeah, I would be texting Dana today. That's the fight I want because then Blades gets a win under his belt against somebody in the top 10, and boom, he's right back to where he was kind of before. Because at the end of the day, we can look at that Blades fight. Blades did have a great first round, and whenever you fight Lewis, we all kind of expect that's what you have to avoid. That's what you have to avoid. He was unable to avoid it, but we don't knock him way down the ladder for that. That can happen to literally anyone. That could happen to Stipe. That could happen to anyone. That's just how much power Derek Lewis has. And so I feel like Blades is still sitting there. Rozenstruik is not. He's going to go behind Volkov. And I agree with what you said. Volkov's the wild card. Volkov is well-rounded. And so the top of this division, I think, is going to get weeded out to the guys that are complete fighters, and the guys that aren't complete fighters are going to get shuffled through. But right now, we have two of those guys, and I'm not insulting Francis. I'm not insulting Derek Lewis. But whenever you look at their skill set on paper, it is punching power. That is their skill set.
All right, so you agree, Gane, Volkov, and then Blades against Rozenstruik? Because a lot of people are saying, and I've read some stories this morning, even some of the ESPN guys were saying that the fight to make is Gane versus Lewis, but I don't agree. I think they hold Lewis on the sidelines just pending what happens with Jones, and because he hasn't fought Stipe and he has the win over Francis. So I think Lewis is being held out, and I think it has to be Gane Volkov, and I think it has to be Blades Rozenstruik. Those are the fights to make. What do you think about that other one, about Gane Volkov? Is that the fight that you want to see next for Gane?
Yeah, I want to see Gane fight Volkov next. I think that's the most meaningful fight that both of those guys can get in, and it clears up the top of the division a little more. Look, Lewis is he's a very popular fighter, right? And we know, the UFC is not dumb. They saw what happened last night, and they know how Gane's going to approach that fight. And so Gane is going to decision Derek Lewis, right? That's what's going to happen to it. Or Lewis is going to land that big bomb, but Gane's not going to give him the opportunities that Blades gave him. And so we know how that fight, in my opinion, we know how that fight's going to play out. I don't think the UFC touches that one. Lewis is incredibly marketable. People love Lewis, man. On the microphone, his interviews, Lewis is a guy you want to stay at the top of the division, and he has a win over the number one contender. So if Ngannou somehow knocks out Stipe in 20 seconds, and people aren't calling for a rematch, you got Lewis and Ngannou ready to go. No matter what happens with Jones, that's already there. That's in place. And I think that the UFC has to match make that way, especially in the heavyweight division right now, because we got pieces moving, and moving in directions that maybe we didn't see before. But I like Volkov and Gane. I think Blades should jump all over the Rozenstruik, because Blades will send Rozenstruik out of the top 10.
I'd be blowing up their phone right now, and that's Blades' last fight on his contract, too. He has one more fight on his deal. He has to win it, stay at the top. I don't think he's going anywhere, because I do think his skill set is as good as anybody in the division besides Stipe, and then if Jones comes in. This is UFC Fallout on MMA Weekly. That's Jeff Cain. I'm Jim Grieshaber, powered by CBD Emporium, featuring Level Select CBD. Guys, it's a 100-hour work week, 15 hours of shows in the last 3 days. Man, you start to drag. You start to feel sore. Been sitting in this chair a lot. I slept wrong last night. Woke up, put the Level 3 cream on from Level Select, put the tincture under my tongue with the immune support from CBD Emporium. Good to go here today, at least to get through the show. Might be a little weekend at Bernie's going on for later, but I'll tell you what, CBD Emporium featuring Level Select CBD is going to have you on top of your game. And right now, you're going to get there a lot easier, because we're going to give you 50% off. Well, actually, they are, because you know us, but 50% off CBD Emporium and Level Select CBD products right now if you go to stayinthefightmma.com and put in the code MMA50, MMA50 at stayinthefightmma.com for CBD Emporium featuring Level Select CBD. Level Select CBD, stay in the fight. All right, so Jeff and I agree it should be Gane versus Volkov. Jeff and I agree it should be Blades versus Rozenstruik, with Lewis being held out. See what happens with Stipe and Ngannou and Jones at the top of the division. And Jeff, before we move on to some other divisions, namely bantamweight, after what we saw last night, and people on that bantamweight bandwagon that we've been on for a long time, bantamweight, lightweight, welterweight, some great divisions right now in the UFC. But before we wrap up the heavyweight talk, I just want to get your thoughts on what Jones tweeted last night and where Jones fits in this division now that we've seen these three fights over the last 4 weeks, where we saw Volkov and Overeem, and we saw Blades and Lewis, and we saw Rozenstruik and Gane. Jones is clearly levels above all those guys, right? Except Stipe. Wouldn't you say?
Yeah. As far as skill set goes, yeah. Jones is smart. Jones is smart. There was a heavyweight fight that was the main event last night that he watched. It wasn't the greatest fight, and so he inserts himself into the storyline. John Jones is a very intelligent at the way he markets himself. And that's what he did last night. He was like, "Hey, I have the opportunity on Twitter to outshine the main event of the UFC fight." And so that's kind of what he tried to do. Is he insert himself into the storyline. And props to him for that. He needs to do that. The UFC needs him to do that. John Jones going to the heavyweight division is going to be one of the biggest stories of the year, if not the biggest story as the year plays out. And so Jones is building that. That's what the UFC. Jones gets it. Jones understands. And so, yeah, man, he put it out there. And then I thought, in Ghana, it was kind of funny when he responded to Jones, which is what Francis has to do, right? You got to respond to the champ. You're not even here. You're not even in the division. You're the light heavyweight champ. You're not. When are you showing up, Daddy? Basically. And so I felt like, Francis did good. I felt like Jones did good. They both seized the moment. And in the world of social media and what we live today, marketing is not what it used to be, and they understand how to market today. Jones, I thought Jones was brilliant last night on Twitter. That was probably the move of the night, right? He might have got a bonus for that tweet.
No, and I have a scenario for you right now, and it's see what you guys think about in the chat. And Noah's Ghost says Volk beats the Gane we saw Saturday. I don't know about that. We'll have to see. But
Yeah, I don't. Yeah.
Jeff, I have a scenario for you right now. Are you ready? This is what I see happening with John Jones right now. Okay, let's just say that Stipe beats Ngannou. I think he's a much better fighter overall. Sorry, Francis, I love you, but to me, until you show more, you're a one-trick pony, and you can't call a guy who hits like that a pony. He's a one-trick Clydesdale. But
Yeah.
Francis Ngannou, right? He's not a pony. But
No.
Stipe beats Ngannou, right? Jones comes up, beats Stipe. Adesanya beats Jan Blachowicz. Jones beats Stipe. Rather than defend the heavyweight belt, Jones takes a step back and lets the heavyweight division with Stipe and Ngannou and all these guys. Maybe Stipe retires. Who knows? Jones beats Stipe. Adesanya beats Jan Blachowicz. Jones, rather than 205 to fight Izzy and try to be that two-division champ that he's never been. So I can definitely see that being the way it plays out for Jones for this year.
Yeah, with Jones looks to me to be committed to heavyweight. He's putting on all the weight and he's doing all of this stuff to prepare to add extra power, to add extra strength, to add extra size. I don't see Jones going back to light heavyweight. I think that he's committed to this, but you could see that, money talks, particularly if Izzy wins, the light heavyweight championship, then man, the money might be too overwhelming for Jones not to start getting on the treadmill, shedding those pounds that he just put on to get back to 205, because that's the biggest fight to make. And so, yeah, man, if that scenario works out, and first of all, Izzy beating Jan is a tall order. That's not a foregone conclusion. That to me,
not at all. To me, it's 50-50, 50-50 right now. I can't pick that one. Yeah. If you ask me right now, gun to my head, you might have to shoot me.
Yeah, that's a tough matchup, and so I don't know how he's going to do. We're going to see that as it plays out. But let's just assume that Izzy wins, like for the scenario, and then I think that man, Jones has to make some real decisions. If Jan wins, then I don't think Jones does anything. He just stays at heavyweight.
No.
Yep. There's no reason to go back unless you get that big fight with Izzy. My biggest question is will Izzy go all the way to heavyweight? Is he willing to go all the way to heavyweight?
He did as a kickboxer. He did.
Yeah.
Once before.
I know. That's intriguing to me, because I think that might be more likely than Jones going back to 205, because it's going to be a lot, and we've seen it, to put on that amount of weight, to cut all that weight off, man, that really takes a long time for your body to adjust and you get your timing right and everything. So I don't really see Jones doing that, but I could see Izzy winning the light heavyweight title and then saying, you know what? Jones is the heavyweight champion now because he just beat Stipe, hypothetically. I want to go to heavyweight. I want to be a 3-division champion right now. And you know what? The UFC does that. Why wouldn't you do that?
Well, it just depends, though. Can he gain enough weight to get there? I mean, the commissions have rules and all that, too. So, it isn't like he could just do it and fight at 193 like he's doing against Jan. You have to be within a certain number of pounds, which barely puts him there for the light heavyweight fight, right? So he'd have to put a bunch of weight on then. Not to say he couldn't do it or wouldn't do it. Izzy to be a 3-division champ, that'd be intriguing, or Jones to go back down and be a 2-division champ. But either way, I think if you ask 90% of UFC fans right now, and 90 might be a big number, 80 to 90% of UFC fans, which fight would you like to see? And you guys answer us in the chat. Let us know in there right now. What fight is your dream fight for 2021? Is it Jones-Stipe? Is it Jones-Izzy? Is it Chandler-Gaethje? Is it McGregor-Khabib 2? What's your dream fight this year in the UFC? Is it Cejudo-Volkanovski? Is it Henry coming back? Who is it? Who's your dream fight, Jeff Cain, for this year? Because I think most people would answer Jones versus Izzy.
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's Jones versus Stipe, because it's GOAT versus GOAT, man, and that to me, gets me excited. I'm like, hell yeah, let's do John Jones and Stipe. I don't care if a title's on the line or not. I don't care what division or what parking lot or what arena that takes place in. That's my dream fight, because it's a GOAT versus a GOAT, and you just don't get that. Now,
no,
Francis could screw that up, right? Francis could throw a monkey wrench right in the middle of all of that. Right now, Jones is sitting perfectly. He's going to get the title fight. It's just a matter of who's he going to fight. And I don't think
that's why
Jones
they messed
really
it up,
cares.
Jeff. They messed
I
it up.
know.
I've said it all along. It should be Jones and Stipe now. If you're not giving Jones a warm-up fight at heavyweight, Francis is not, to me, the contender that you just automatically put in there and say, no, Jones, you have to wait. Unless Jones just wanted more time to get ready for heavyweight, which I can see, and then they didn't want to hold it up that long. But I also think the UFC, and I'm going to get myself in trouble here if I don't watch it, and Dana will call me an asshole or whatever, but I just don't think the UFC values Stipe like they should, and I don't think the UFC values. I don't think the fans value Stipe. I don't think we appreciate. He's quiet. I mean, look, when he lost to DC the first time, they basically had Brock Lesnar stepping over him to go in there and confront DC. They didn't even give Stipe an interview. He had defended the belt more times than any champion in history. He didn't even get an interview after that fight. Think about the lack of respect there. There have been issues, and I know for sure, and I have inside information on this, there have been issues between Stipe's camp and the UFC for years. He has not been the happiest guy with the way the UFC has treated him. I know that. But that being said, there's no discounting him being a six-time champion. I just don't think that the UFC really wants Stipe to hang around all that much longer. I just don't think that they want him. Look, he's an exciting fighter at times. The DC trilogy, the third fight was okay, right? I mean, it went all 5 rounds, but it wasn't the greatest fight in the world. Stipe did exactly what he had to do to win. The UFC's fairy tale ending for DC didn't work out, but I think that there are some people in Vegas across from the Apex at World Headquarters where they're just sitting there thinking, okay, we want Francis to win this fight, then we want Jones and Francis, and we just want to move on. But to me, there's nothing more intriguing than GOAT versus GOAT, Jones versus Stipe. I don't know how well that fight sells compared to Jones versus Francis. Jones coming up to heavyweight's going to sell a lot regardless. I think you're going to get 1 million buys. But which fight gets more buys, Jones Stipe or Jones Ngannou? Because the electrifying knockout power and potential of Ngannou, with a lot of people out there who hate Jones, let's be honest, he's 50-50, he's a polarizing dude. There are just as many people who want to see John Jones' head fly up over the octagon 5 rows deep into the newly, filled arena with the fans coming back. There are just as many of those people as there are people who want to see Jones fight Stipe and get that belt.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Stipe's a working man's fighter, right? I mean, he's a Frankie Edgar. He's a working man's fighter. He's not a guy that's going to go out and talk a lot of smack. But he gets it done in the octagon. And so I don't know why the UFC doesn't push Stipe. Stipe's the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. There's no dispute in that. And he doesn't get the push that other fighters get, and I don't know why that is. And the only thing I can think of is he doesn't have that boisterous personality. He doesn't have that, maybe it factor that everybody wants. Because look, Francis doesn't have to say a word. Francis is an imposing figure. Like, you just put.
But where was
Francis
the PR though for Stipe? Where was the PR, Jeff, for Stipe? Like, we just saw Michael Chandler where he adopted the little black baby, which is really super cool, and I love that for Black History Month, right? And that's awesome. That's a great PSA. Yeah. I love it when they show those sides of fighters. But where was Stipe's during the pandemic? This guy's a firefighter saying, I'm going to wait to fight until after I do my duty in my community. Where's the PSAs there? Where's all this feel-good stuff for Stipe being a firefighter and contributing to the community? Why has that not been pushed more? The only push he got was the Modelo deal, and the UFC didn't do that deal. Modelo and Stipe's team did it. Constellation Brands and Stipe's team did that deal. So when I look at Stipe not getting the push, I believe that the UFC never really got behind him. They never really gave him that push. Now, in their defense, and I don't know, I'm just saying here, maybe he didn't, get on board with that and want that complete push the way some fighters do. But I think at the end of the night, Stipe and Jones is the fight we all want to see. There's no reason. If this were anyone, Jeff, but Stipe, if this were Conor McGregor, if this were Israel Adesanya, anyone else, there's no way they would have him fighting Francis Ngannou before the chance to fight GOAT versus GOAT against Jones. I don't know why it's happening this way with Stipe. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. You mentioned it earlier. Maybe Jones wasn't ready for heavyweight yet, and so we got to let the division play out, because it doesn't matter who Jones fights. The storyline that John Jones is going up to heavyweight's intact, really, without Stipe and without Francis. That sits on its own. John Jones going up to heavyweight.
This is GOAT versus GOAT, though. This is GSP Silva that we never got. That's the only one we could even think of, the two of us, that even compares, and we never got that fight. Yeah,
I agree. That's why I want this fight. I'm just saying that for the fans' perspective, I don't know what they want. Like I said, you don't Stipe. And look, there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, and you know this, Jim, and I know this. You know, with sponsorships and everything, and maybe other fighters in the heavyweight division draw more interest to the promotion through sponsors than Stipe does for whatever reason. I don't understand it. I love Stipe. Stipe is absolutely the perfect mixed martial artist. He doesn't sit here and talk. Let the talking take place in the octagon. You know, we can talk all the crap we want. Close the doors and let's get this thing over with. And that's why I like Stipe. But I don't know that that's marketable to everyone. I don't know that the casual fan, for instance, looks at Ngannou and is like, holy shit. You know, that is a superhuman being. And so you don't even have to say a word to promote Francis in that way. And where, like with Lewis, he doesn't have that imposing physique that Ngannou has. So you kind of let Lewis talk and he markets himself through the microphone. And Stipe doesn't have that for him. And so I don't know. I think that maybe the UFC is getting maybe too caught up in what's the biggest sell to advertisers.
Brock Lesnar has Paul Heyman talking for him in the WWE. You know you need someone talking for you if you're not a talker, because Stipe is the greatest heavyweight champion of all time. And, you know, Cool Breeze says it in the chat room. Stipe isn't marketable, can't draw money. I disagree with that. Stipe's had some fights that have drawn some money, but he isn't that smooth talker. He isn't that antagonist. He isn't. And someone said Colby versus Tony for the fight they want to see, which different weight classes, but that doesn't stop people from moving up sometimes. But Pavlo 005 says if Stipe loses and they disrespect him by not giving him a rematch immediately and give the title shot to JJ, I think he might even retire or wait another year, fight for the title, and if wins title again, retires to piss the UFC off. Here's the thing. If Stipe loses to Ngannou, it's only happening one way. Francis Ngannou is not going to win a 5-round decision over Stipe Miocic. There's no way on God's green earth. I swear, like literally, that would be, you'd bet $100 and win $70 million if that happened. There's no chance. The only way Ngannou wins that fight is to violently knock out Stipe. And historically, when a champion gets knocked out like that, they don't get the rematch. So I'm fine with that. You get knocked out, you get finished violently. I'm fine with there not being a rematch, even if you are Stipe with 6 in a row. So Stipe's got to win this fight to get that fight against Jones. That would be the biggest money fight of Stipe's career. The biggest money fight of Stipe's career would be against John Jones, without a doubt, should he beat Ngannou. So he's got a ton on the line, even though he's already the GOAT. And the chat room, Jeff, is filling up with comments right now, and I love it. This is a great topic. David Bond says, I think Bones is just looking for the right matchup at heavyweight. I don't think he really wants to get in the mix with the division. I think he's teasing people. You know what, David Bond and Jeff, let's pick up on what David just put in the chat. That is a great point. John Jones wants to fight Stipe. John Jones wants to fight Francis. Obviously, you've said Stipe is a bad matchup stylistically maybe for Jones. Jones might be secretly hoping that Francis wins. Maybe everybody in the UFC is hoping that Ngannou wins because he's a better matchup for Jones, and you'd rather have Jones with the heavyweight belt than Stipe or Francis. Who knows?
You know, I mean, the biggest question and the most intriguing question for me is what fight sells more? What fight sells more pay-per-views? John Jones versus Stipe or John Jones versus Ngannou? And Jim, I don't know the answer to that question. And sadly, I'm leaning towards probably Jones and Ngannou, you know, just because of the fans. You know, you don't have to, for the casual fans, you don't have to sell them GOAT. You know, you don't have to sell them all these storylines. Sometimes it's just the aesthetics of a fighter that gives them to jump in there. You know, and I think, so I don't know.
Yeah.
You know,
but Stipe will never have more fans in his life than he does when he fights John Jones, because all the people look. I mean, look. The only reason George Bush the first didn't win re-election is because Ross Perot took a whole bunch of his votes. Clinton didn't get any more votes than he would have gotten, but Perot took a bunch of Bush's votes, right? Well, Stipe now will get all those fans, even if they're not Stipe fans. All the fans who hate John Jones will now become Stipe fans, kind of like this election where Trump lost more than Biden won. Biden didn't win this election. Trump lost the election because people would have voted for anyone over Donald Trump. And Biden was the beneficiary of that. I think Stipe would pick up so many more fans just from the people who hate John Jones. It would literally bring them all to Team Stipe, and it would be a dream scenario for him. So I think the interest would be super huge for Jones versus Stipe, because Jones is that guy. He's like Floyd Mayweather. You either want to see him keep dominating or you want to see him laying in a pool of his own blood with his head detached. There's no in between.
No, Stipe's star would rise considerably with a win over John Jones. for exactly what you're saying. Jon Jones isn't a likable figure to a lot of people. He's the opposite of Stipe. He's
People
the
hate him.
opposite
A
of a
lot of
blue
people hate
collar
him.
worker. Yeah, he's the guy who hid underneath the cage to avoid testing. He's the guy that's been tested positive. He's the guy that's gotten in his own way. The only people that hold wins over Jon Jones is Jon Jones himself and the penal system, the court system. But yeah, I agree though that if Stipe beats Jones, then Stipe's a bigger star than he's ever been. But that might be what scares the hell out of the UFC because, as you brought up earlier, Stipe's relationship with the UFC is not smooth. Not that Jones's
Frosty.
is,
Frosty, right? Yeah,
a little frosty. Where so from the UFC, and look, the UFC doesn't dictate any of this. The fighters fight. It's determined in the octagon. But we would all be lying to ourselves if we didn't say, boy, the UFC would have loved to see Conor knock out Poirier. Or man, they would have loved to see Francis knock out Stipe. Yeah, man, they would for several reasons, for marketability, and plus, who the hell's got the bigger contract? Do you pay? Is Ngannou making more than Stipe? Well, because it's a promotion,
not
I
at all.
always want the guy. Exactly. So I want the guy not getting paid as much to get up there because then it saves me money. But the situation with the UFC is complicated. But I agree. The premise of what you're saying is that Jones, being the heel that he is, Stipe's star only rises with a win over him.
Huge. Or just the lead up to that fight, if you have enough. And that's the first fight back with fans, International Fight Week in July. I mean, think about that. We're gearing up to have fans back in the summer and maybe even half capacity, maybe even full. Who the hell knows by the time the vaccines keep rolling out, and who knows what happens with the virus and the media and the politicians anyway. But at the end of the day, if that's the first fight back with fans, that would be an unbelievable environment and atmosphere. I wouldn't miss that for anything. And there's our buddy, the Dark Cloud NC, always here. We appreciate the loyalists, the diehards, every show we do here on MMA Weekly. Jones gets slept by Stipe in the second round, and he said before that Bones doesn't deserve a fight with Stipe if Stipe defeats Francis. There's literally zero logic anymore. I know you and I disagree with that one, Jeff. I think we both agree that Jones would definitely deserve a title shot right away against Stipe because it's GOAT versus GOAT. And if Jones says I'm moving up and you have that opportunity to put the greatest light heavyweight of all time against the greatest heavyweight of all time, there's zero. I mean, the only thing that you would do is, for some reason, book Francis before that. Still don't understand it. But there's no logic to me. Literally no logic that would top the logic that says Jones does deserve the shot against Stipe, because he does. If he goes up, for sure he does.
100%. And there's precedent. When Nunez went up and fought Cyborg, did she deserve it? Because of her fights at 145? No. But did she deserve it because of her dominance in the 135-pound division? Yep. Did Conor McGregor deserve the lightweight championship fight when he went up? Nope. But did he deserve it because of what he did in the division below? Yep.
Did Chael Sonnen ever deserve a title fight? No. Never.
Not outside of the first one in the WEC. No, he didn't.
Right.
So deserving doesn't really matter. Jon Jones is the GOAT. Right? He's the GOAT. He's not the light heavyweight GOAT. Jon Jones is the GOAT of mixed martial arts, period. Forget about the weight classes. And so he deserves whatever fight that they can get somebody to fight him. And Stipe, man, that's a tough matchup for Jones. But Jones deserves a heavyweight title fight because he's Jon Jones. He's the greatest light heavyweight champion of all time. He's the greatest athlete, the greatest mixed martial artist of all time. So I don't know how you deserve something more. If Jon Jones wants to go up and fight somebody at the 500-pound weight class, he deserves it.
No, and Jon Jones did not look great against Thiago Santos. Jon Jones didn't look good at all against Dominic Reyes, and Reyes looked pretty good in that fight. But Jones has been in people's minds maybe slipping a little bit, maybe a little disengaged, disinterested, and we've heard this a million times. If you went out and talked to people at Jackson Wink or people who know Jon Jones, not the hardest working guy, not the guy who's the gym rat there 20 hours a day, working to get better and better. And I know a lot of guys who aren't like that, who are just great. And that just happens. You're not everybody's Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant who's going to outwork you. Some people get by on their gifts a little more than their work ethic. And that's not to say Jones doesn't have a good work ethic. It's just to say that he's not that relentless guy in the gym. And we saw that happen with Conor too. Certainly everybody's got their own approach. But I think what Cool Breeze says is dead on, Jeff. He says Jones versus Francis, sell the most, but easiest for Jones. Jones versus Stipe doesn't sell, but tougher for Jones. It sells, it just doesn't sell as much as Jones and Ngannou. I agree with that.
Dude, if I'm John Jones, I'm hoping Ngannou wins. I think that outside of the big punch, that's an easy blueprint for John Jones. Doesn't have to think about that fight very much. He knows exactly what he's going to do. With Stipe, it becomes a really a chess match that I don't know if he has the advantage in most of the scenarios. You know, where Francis, he has the advantage in almost every aspect other than punching power. I agree with what the commenter said. I think that Ngannou is the best matchup for Jones, but Stipe, but it might sell more. Yeah, you know, I don't know, man. This heavyweight division is weird. John Jones coming in there and doing what he's doing. We don't know the time frame. You know, I wish that John Jones would come out and say, I want to fight here on this date, because then we'd know. Then we'd know if Stipe's getting an immediate rematch if he loses. Then we'd know what the hell's going to happen. But right now, without a date and a time frame, I don't know how many fights play out in the top of that division before Jones actually shows up in the octagon against a heavyweight. And so that's the big unknown in that whole scenario. But I agree. I think that Ngannou's an easier fight for Jones than Stipe is. I think Lewis is even easier than Ngannou.
Yeah, and Noah's Ghost says, I think they want Francis as champion because they can pay him less than Stipe and Jones. And, you know, I don't know about all that, but I mean, there is something the conspiracy theorists love that one. Pavlo005 says, if Ngannou beats Stipe, he is a star, like top 3 in the UFC, so they would need to pay him big money. And Francis is a guy who, becoming champion, would definitely command huge money because of the knockouts and because of the head hunting style. And he's going for your head, like Conor McGregor. He's going for your look. Say what you want about Conor. He went right after Khabib. He went right after Dustin Poirier. He tried to take Poirier's head off in that first round. He threw a bunch of big shots at him. And Poirier even said at one point, hey, if Conor had connected with another one, I might have been in trouble. You're watching UFC Fallout. We're going to keep it going. We still haven't talked about the bantamweight division. You know, there's a bunch of things. We turn the corner, looking ahead to next week. Don't forget, you know, we have the pre-fight show, the preview show coming up, and live stream next week during the pay-per-view. 3 title fights. Plus, I mean, the first fight on the main card. The first fight on the main card is Santos versus Rakic, and that's a big-time title eliminator fight in the light heavyweight division. You have Islam at lightweight, maybe the top prospect in the division. People are so excited to see, and that's the Drew Dober fight. Is Drew Dober going to stop the hype train, or is Islam going to keep going? And then, of course, you have the 3 title fights, Jan versus Sterling, Nunez versus Megan Anderson, and then the main event, which is Israel Adesanya going up to 205 to try to take the belt from Jan Blachowicz. But before we get there, Jeff, we have to hit the bantamweight division. And before we do that, I want to remind you that you're watching UFC Fallout on MMA Weekly, powered by CBD Emporium, featuring Level Select CBD. 3 levels for 3 levels of pain. It's good for anxiety, good for sleep, all sorts of things like that. I wouldn't miss it. It's part of my routine every single day. Hey, routines are important, right? Without a doubt. You have to have a routine. Every successful person has a routine every single day. And a big part of my routine is taking my Level Select CBD from CBD Emporium. And right now you're going to get 50% off CBD Emporium and Level Select CBD brands just by entering the code MMA50 at stayinthefightmma.com. Go to stayinthefightmma.com, enter the code MMA50 for 50% off CBD Emporium and Level Select CBD products. Level Select CBD. Stay in the fight. Jeff, you have any more thoughts on heavyweight before we move on to 135?
I mean, no, we're just waiting. I mean, you know, we're kind of on hold in the heavyweight division. This is played out, and everybody's kind of got their slots in, and now we're just waiting for the title fight to play out and then to figure out a date of when John Jones is coming up.
All right, well, we're waiting on the title fight to play out at 135, too, and we don't have to wait long at UFC 259. The Funk Master Aljamain Sterling, who has the most wins in the bantamweight division since 2014. The second most is Pedro Munoz, who beat Jimmy Rivera last night, number 8 versus number 9 matchup. But as I rewatched the fight night, and I didn't rewatch all the fights because I wanted to still be alive by the time we did the show, and the whole fight card in general wasn't that great, but I did rewatch Rivera and Munoz, Jeff, and for that to be number 8 and number 9, think about this division right now. You have a legend, former champion, multiple-time champion in Dominic Cruz at number 11. You have 2 other legends in Jose Aldo and Frankie Edgar in that division at number 5 and number 7. You have a former champ who looked like he was going to rule the division forever, not even ranked because he haven't come back yet off his PED suspension in TJ Dillashaw. And then you have killers who are moving their way up. I mean, you even have young fighters like a Sugar Sean O'Malley who's in that division and, coming off that loss to Chito Vera when he hurt his foot, but he's a guy who people think could make a title run. You have a former champion, Cody Garbrandt, Marlon Moraes, if he turns things around, Rob Font, who's on fire moving up those rankings, and Corey Sandhagen, who is literally just blasting everything in his way after, that one submission loss to Aljo last June, notwithstanding. But this division is the most loaded division in the UFC, with Petr Yan sitting on top of it. And ironically speaking, look, he fought Aldo, and Aldo was coming off a loss and literally sitting there, and he beats Aldo for the title. So to me, it's like when Khabib beat Ray Janelle, he had to prove to me that he was a legitimate champion at 155, which he's done. I don't consider Yan to be the legitimate champ in that division because of who he beat to win the belt. And I don't care what anybody says. To me, he needs to beat a couple more fighters before I consider him to be the legitimate champion of this incredible division right now at 135.
He sits atop of that division, and it is stacked. You brought up the Munoz and Rivera fight. Look, Rivera's, with that loss, is going to drop all the way to number 12. He's going to drop all the way to number 12 with that loss. And it's just a murderer's row in there. Yeah, man, Yan didn't beat the number one contender or whatever. He did beat a legend in the sport, and he dispatched of him convincingly. And so I'll give him that. I agree with you. I mean, he's the champion. He has the belt. But I agree that I want to see him against the Dillashaws. I want to see him against the Cody Garbrandts. I want to see him against those guys that I feel are more proven in their career right now than Aldo is right now. I mean, Jose's a legend, man. Nobody can take away what Aldo's done. But where he is in his career right now is not on the same path as TJ Dillashaw.
And coming into a new division, right? Yeah. At 35.
And so,
at the time.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying at the top of that division. But look, we can't sleep on Peter, man. That dude is a killer. And
he's a beast.
But that whole division is. Yeah, that whole division is. I mean, the drop off between the champion and number 12 isn't that far. Not that far at all. Now, other guys sprinkled in between there that I feel like maybe shouldn't be at those rankings potentially. But still, literally 1 through 12 is a murderer's row in that division.
No, and Yan has 4 finishes in the UFC, and, it's tougher to get finishes in the lower weight classes because, look, it's not heavyweight where one shot's going to take someone's head off. It's tougher to get finishes, but Yan is definitely a beast. His game is well-rounded, and he does have a unanimous decision win over Jimmy Rivera. He does have a devastating knockout win over Uriah Faber, which to me, Faber wasn't, a contender at that point in time anyway, but that was a good win for him to get him name recognition over a legend of the sport. And then he just bludgeoned Aldo to death in that fight. Literally, I still can't, I can't watch the replay of that fight because I can't watch Aldo take that unnecessary beating. And I forget who ref that fight, but they should never ref a fight again for the rest of their lives because that was awful. I mean, awful to watch what happened to Jose Aldo in that fight. But when I look at Yan as the champion, when I say that to me, he's not the real champion, I'm not saying that to disrespect him. I'm saying that the way that he, the path that he took to the belt is not ideal or the path that you would want to see. Sterling, on the other hand, look, I mean, who hasn't this guy beaten? He lost 2 in a row to Brian Caraway and Rafael Asuncel back in 2017. The only fight he's lost since then was a knockout to Marlon Moraes, and that was also in 2017. Look, he's beaten Cody Stamann, Jimmy Rivera, Pedro Munoz, and Corey Sandhagen back to back to back to back. That's 2 Drake songs back to back twice. So he definitely deserves the title shot more than anybody in this division right now. And I would say, based on the fact that he beat Sandhagen and Sandhagen's beaten everybody else, and now Sandhagen's come back and done what he's done in those 2 fights since then, he's the guy after that. Because what he did to Marlon and what he did to Frankie following the loss to Aljamain Sterling to bounce back, to me, those 2 guys, Sterling and Sandhagen, deserve the title shots, and they might even be more of a champion to me than Yan, depending upon who ends up with the belt. But for sure, if Sterling wins this fight, the fight to make is the rematch with Sandhagen, and if Yan wins this fight, the fight to make is Yan versus Sandhagen. So I don't buy that Sandhagen should have to fight Dillashaw. I don't think Dillashaw would deserve that fight coming in. I think Sandhagen gets the nice title shot no matter what. And then TJ is going to have to win a fight to get there. The question is, who do you match Dillashaw up with coming back in? Because it's going to be one of the very top guys in the division. And if I had to take a guess, maybe it's the loser of Yan Sterling. Maybe he has to beat Rob Font, but I don't know if you want to derail Font's hype train. Who does Font get next? This division is absolute. Cody Garbrandt's lurking right there. And when you look at Cody No Love, the former champion, he wants another shot at Dillashaw. There are so many potential matchups, and Munoz coming back up the ladder now. So many great matchups in this division to look forward to.
Yeah, I mean, Dillashaw's the wild card. I mean, he's the wild card. What does the UFC do with Dillashaw? I agree that I don't think anybody should get a title fight coming off a suspension, although we've seen it before. So the question to me that I have to ask myself is Dillashaw as big enough of a star to where he gets that treatment? Because there are fighters on the UFC roster who could come back from a suspension and a loss and get a title fight. I don't know that TJ Dillashaw's name value is enough to warrant that. So I think TJ is going to come in and have to take one fight. And the UFC is going to have to decide, do you want it to be against somebody who you've built up while TJ's been sitting on the sidelines? Or do you give TJ one of those guys in the lower top 10 to get him a win and kind of move forward past what TJ's done to himself? And then throw him into a title fight. They could throw him in a title fight right out of the gate, but with this stacked of a division, there's no reason to. If this were a thin division, then it would make more sense.
Well, I'm wondering too. Would you? I mean, Cruz beats Casey Kenny. Do you do the Dillashaw Cruz? I mean, I don't know. I mean, those are big money fights, maybe, but I still think it's going to be Dillashaw. It's not going to be Cody because they already fought. I don't think it's going to be Cody. I think they're going to want Dillashaw at the top of the division. So I think maybe because it's not going to be Sandhagen, and I hope it's not. I hope Sandhagen gets the title shot without having to fight Dillashaw because I think he deserves it. But I do think Dillashaw's second fight would be for the belt if he wins the first one. So that being said, is it Aldo? Is it Cruz if Cruz beats Kenny? Is it Rob Font? Who would you put Dillashaw in there with?
Cruz. I would do Cruz.
I would do Cruz
because Cruz has name value. And
winner
Cruz
gets a title shot. Why not? Give Cruz another title shot. Why not?
In the latter part of his career, and plus Cruz is in the fold. Cruz is going to be a commentator. Cruz's career, the lights kind of dimming on it. Or Dillashaw's right in his prime. We can say what we want about Dillashaw. We can't really question his skill set and just how talented of a fighter he is. The guy is extremely talented. We just brought up Dominick Cruz. Plus, we'll get to see that kind of footwork because I don't care what anybody says. TJ Dillashaw fights the way that he fights because Dominick Cruz. Dominick Cruz was a huge influence on TJ Dillashaw, whether Dillashaw wants to admit it or not. All you got to do is look at both of their footwork and say, wow, somebody copied the other one. But I want to see that fight. I think that fight makes a lot of sense.
Oh, and TJ would be all over that. Cruz would too, but TJ would because you remember they fought on my birthday in 2016, and I believe Boston, and Cruz won a controversial decision that Dillashaw didn't agree with to reclaim the belt when Dillashaw had it. So I think that TJ for sure would want that fight. TJ would be supremely confident going into that fight, and then Cruz, obviously would take it. And then, of course, you have Henry Cejudo sitting on the outside. I think the fight that lures Henry back is Volkanovski to try to be a 3-division champ, but I don't see anybody in the bantamweight division who brings Henry back other than Dillashaw with the belt. And Dillashaw says, come get it at 35 Triple C. And I think that brings Henry back, or Volkanovski brings Henry back. Other than that, and this is not me being friends with Henry and knowing inside info. That's just my guess. If I were to ask Henry this and get his honest thoughts off the record, I would say those would be the two fights that would lure him back.
Yeah, I mean, if Jan goes on a longer winning streak, it just depends on if Cejudo's serious about even coming back. Because the longer we get away from that retirement, the return becomes less and less likely. And so I think if Henry's going to come back, he's going to come back soon. And so it's going to be against people that's right there now. And like you said, the chance to be 3-division champion would probably lure him back because he likes those accolades, right? He likes the gold medal and all the belts, and he'll take another one. Or that to come in and kind of dethrone a dominant champion, which Jan has the possibility of being, but it's going to take him 3 or 4 fights before he establishes that.
Right.
But Dillashaw, on the other hand, that could bring. I could see where that could bring Henry back, and it would definitely. That's a fight that Dillashaw will call for. That's a fight Dillashaw will probably call for. I mean, if Dillashaw comes back, let's just say Dillashaw comes back and gets a title fight and wins it in his first fight. Who's he call out? Henry Cejudo.
Well, I don't think he gets a title shot his first fight. I think he win. I think he would fight Cruz if Cruz wins, and then you have to think Dillashaw would probably win that fight. Sorry, Dom, love you, but I would bet on TJ if you had a gun to my head on that one. And then the second fight is for the belt against a Sterling or a Jan, maybe a Sandhagen, whoever has the belt at that point in time. And then he calls out Cejudo right away. So I think he would for sure call out Cejudo. Look, fighters, we're in a different era now. Fighters are calling out who makes the money for them. Usman called out Masvidal because Masvidal makes him the money. That's what it's all about right now. Everyone calls out Conor. I just interviewed Patricio Pitbull. It's going up on MMA Weekly this week. I just interviewed him, the $1 million bet that he threw down to Dana White to fight any UFC fighter. I asked him if he had his choice, who would it be? Who'd he say? Conor. Everyone calls out Conor because everyone wants the money fight. Yeah. There is no bigger money fight at 35 than Dillashaw versus Cejudo. There just isn't. I mean, Aldo, Edgar, no. Dillashaw Cejudo would be the biggest money fight in that division. We're a ways away from getting there, but I really can't see how do you skip Corey Sandhagen and say, no, Dillashaw gets the winner of Sterling and Jan. I can't imagine they would do that. That would be a crime. But after what they've done with Aljo for the past few years, nothing would surprise me because it's taken him forever to get this title shot. He should have had it right away after he beat Sandhagen last June, but it was Aldo who had it the next month against Jan.
Yeah, you know, it's
for the vacant
it's
title.
A complicated business, man. It's a complicated business. I mean, TJ very well could get a title fight in his first fight. I mean, he could. That's a very real possibility. Former champion. He's coached the Ultimate Fighter, right? He's had the rivalry with the Alpha Male. He's had the rivalry with Cody. He's had the rivalry with Conor. So he's built, right? I mean, everybody knows who TJ Dillashaw is. He could get that fight. I agree with you. I think it would be a great injustice, but he could be. And yeah, I wasn't saying earlier. What I'm saying is that when Dillashaw gets the title, he's going to call out one person, and we all know who that's going to be. Now, we don't know if Dillashaw, and I say that if Dillashaw gets the title fight in his first fight or his second fight, it doesn't matter. If he gets the belt back, he's calling out Cejudo. That's what he's going to do. So he's like right now Henry's best friend, if you ask me, because I think that's probably Henry's biggest fight coming back. That's the biggest fight they can do. That's the biggest money, sadly, that Henry Cejudo can make in the sport right now, unless something crazy happens and he can go up. Who knows, man? At the end of the day, we might have Conor McGregor and Henry Cejudo in a damn beach fight somewhere with 3 million pay-per-views. Who knows, man? No, this is a crazy sport.
He wants to fight. He wants to fight. Captain Eric Albarracin said it to me. He wants to, or no, I'm sorry. Vitor Belfort said it to me in our interview. Henry Cejudo wants to fight Max Holloway. That's his dream. He'd love to see Holloway take Volkanovski out, and Henry versus Max would be, for the 45 belt would be, that's the one Henry would want the most. And this is all you need to know about Henry Cejudo, why he is who he is, because he thinks that would be his most challenging fight. And Henry wants the most challenging fight. I mean, look at who he's fought and who he's beaten. There's no doubt about that. But he also wants the money at this point. And guys, throw it up in the chat. Who do you want? Where do you think Dillashaw falls in this division? Where do you want to see him? Who do you want to see TJ fight? Does Cruz have another run left in him? Who do you want to see Henry Cejudo come back and fight? Throw it up in the chat. We're having fun here. But I do know, Jeff, the fight next week, Jan versus Sterling. If Sterling wins that belt from Jan in a classic back and forth epic matchup, where everyone's calling for a rematch, there's no guarantee that you're going to see a rematch with Sandhagen there, with Dillashaw coming back. I just believe Sandhagen deserves, especially if Aljo wins that belt over Jan, then Sandhagen gets a chance to avenge that loss to Sterling. But if Jan wins and Sandhagen hasn't fought him, it's definitely, and look, when you see the 8 and 9 fighters, I defy you to have 8 and 9 fighters in any division look as good as Munoz and Rivera did last night. That's such an incredible division when you think about bantamweight. Jeff, before we wrap up the bantamweight talk and turn the corner into a little bit of UFC 259 chat before we wrap this up, where do you see the bantamweight division going right now? Because like we said, there's so many great fighters at the top of it. Who do you want to see Rob Font? I'd love to see Rob fight Cody, but Cody could be, obviously they talked about him going to 25 to fight Figueiredo. If Figueiredo beats Brandon Moreno in a close fight, or if Moreno beats Figueiredo in a close fight, you could get the trilogy right away. But if Figueiredo wins again, you got to have an opponent for him, and the opponent for him in a completely depleted 25 division isn't there. Cody No Love probably gets that title shot, which takes him out of bantamweight for a while.
God, I can't even imagine Cody at that weight, man. I can't imagine. I don't know, because what was going through my mind when we talk about this division is, if TJ Dillashaw is allowed to be ranked tomorrow, where would I put him in the division? And I put him number one. I would put him number one. Now that doesn't mean that he should leapfrog Sandhagen and some of these other people. But I mean, honestly, if I have to look at that division and I'm like, man, where does TJ fit in? TJ's the number one contender in that division. But I still don't give him a title fight. I still do not give him a title fight. I don't know how that division plays out. Can Jan hold off this murderer's row that are stacked up behind him? I mean, when you talk about, damned if you do, damned if you don't. Here's a guy who's got to fight Aljo, the Funk Master, and then he just looks behind there and he's like, Jesus, there's Cody and Sandhagen, and then Dillashaw, forgot about him, and then Cejudo's over here just itching to come back to fight somebody. I mean, wow, that is a crazy division. I think that Jan is an incredible fighter. And I think he could hold on to the belt for a long time, but he hasn't got those wins to kind of prove that yet. And that's what's interesting to me about that division. Can Jan hang on to it? Can he keep Dillashaw away from getting it back? While everybody else tries to make sure Cody doesn't knock him out. Can Dominic get that run back? God, man, wouldn't that be a story, right? I mean, you talk about an underdog story and a story of perseverance, man. That should be an ESPN 30-30 right there, is if that guy could get back to a title fight. There's tons of storylines in this division. It's probably my favorite division in the UFC, on the UFC's roster, man, because it's just so stacked that it doesn't matter who. I mean, I would love to see Jan fight Cody. I would like to see him fight TJ. I'd like to see him fight Henry coming back. I want to see him fight Dominic. I want to see all those fights, man. Every one of them I want to see.
Sandhagen, no doubt. No, and we have a lot of people in the chat hitting us up, and I'm gonna hold Noah's ghost for a second, but Johan says, I think they're gonna give TJ the title shot. Would not be surprised. Ryan Diamond says Sandhagen Aljo 2 is a hard sell, considering he just ran through him a year ago. Good point. Maybe if Jan wins at Sandhagen, if Aljo wins at somebody else. Pablo005 said, if Aljo didn't get the title shot before, don't see Sandhagen getting the title next. He is also not a big name and not a guy who would make a lot of money for UFC. So Sand probably needs one or more wins. And he says, I'm speaking in a UFC way because UFC makes those rankings, but then they don't follow them. The rule is simple. Which fighter makes the most money for us? Also, he gets the title shot. The UFC doesn't make the rankings. Jeff has a vote on the rankings, and, that's not the way the rankings work. But, Jeff, Noah's ghost, they need to give Merab a top guy. Merab Dvalishvili is unbelievable. They need to give him a top guy. He's another guy who could throw a big monkey wrench into those plans. But Noah's ghost says TJ versus Merab. I can see this happening, though. Sandhagen's not a big name, especially if Sterling wins, and he just ran through Corey Sandhagen a year. I mean, choked him out in the first round, got us back, done deal, right? And Sandhagen's crushed Marias and, Frankie Edgar since then. But TJ Dillashaw is the biggest name in that division. Let me repeat that. TJ Dillashaw, maybe Dominic Cruz, 1 and 2. TJ Dillashaw, the biggest name at the top of that division. So let's say Sterling wins. And even if Jan wins, I can very easily see next week TJ Dillashaw gets that title shot, gets the winner. I could very easily see that happening.
I'm glad that the commenter brought up Merab because I have him in my notes. I have him right there in my notes. He's the wild card in that division. I even wrote it out phonetically.
He's like Islam at 55. Yep.
Dvalishvili. But he's the wild card in there, and he's sitting in a great spot because the top of that division are all going to go at each other, and he's going to fight one of them. He's going to get one of them. And all he has to do is get past him, and then he's sitting in a great spot. That's a new face in that division. I like TJ versus Dominic because I think the storyline's built in, and it's two legends, and I think that gives Cruz respect, right? You're at the twilight of your career, but we're going to give you the shot. If you win this fight, man, you get another title shot. I like that scenario all the way around.
He's fighting an unranked guy on the prelims. You got to throw him something after that. You do. You just do. Yeah. He's a legend.
Yeah. And with Merab, I feel like he's the next group that's going to come through. Right now, we're still working through the Dillashaws and the Cruzes and the Cody Garbrandts and that kind of group. And I feel like Merab's that next group that the UFC's kind of lining up to not really get up there and compete with these guys just yet, to let them sort it out, and then Merab get up there and compete with those guys as it thins out a little bit at the top. But I'm glad you brought him up, or the commenter brought him up, because I think he's the wild card of that division, the one nobody's talking about, and on a win streak right now with a crazy skill set. I look forward to seeing him and how he progresses. I mean, we talk about the title picture. We also have to look at those prospects. What prospect gets you excited in that division? Merab's one of them.
Without a doubt. So that's interesting, man. And I love the interaction in the chat. Really appreciate it, guys, as we turn the corner and take a peek at UFC 259 next week to wrap up our show. Maybe 5-10 minutes left here. Jesus from America says Dana should pay us all to watch yesterday's card. I think he meant card, not cars. It's funny. Dana should pay us all. And there you see the poster floating around in outer space. We love that one. I mean, champ, 4 champs, 3 title fights, UFC 259 next week, Jeff. And, before we get to that, I want to remind you that you're watching UFC Fallout right here on MMA Weekly. We are live, and it's powered by CBD Emporium, featuring Level Select CBD, 3 levels for 3 levels of pain. And right now, there's only one level of a discount you're going to get. 50% off, half for you math majors, 50% off. That means a $100 bottle of CBD is only $50. All you have to do is go to stayinthefight.mma.com, enter the code MMA50, stay in the fight, MMA.com. The code's MMA50 for 50% off CBD Emporium and Level Select CBD products. Level Select CBD. Stay in the fight. And Jeff, we're still in the fight. We got a little bit of time left. It's been a long week of shows here on MMA Weekly. Every week we have the preview show. We have the live streams during the fights. Don't miss all our new content coming out. Smash that like button, the subscribe button, the bell, ring the bell, so we can let you know when we're going to be on. And every time we come on with a new show, you'll be notified right away. Keep those subscriptions coming. Help us out with the algorithm of YouTube as we help you out, bringing you the best content in mixed martial arts right here, not even close, at MMA Weekly. And Jeff, as we turn the corner into UFC 259, we've been waiting for this card for a long time. 4 champions, 3 title fights, but it isn't just that, man. We're going to see some of the top young prospects in the sport like Kyler Phillips, Casey Kenny with the opportunity of a lifetime against Dominic Cruz. Joseph Benavidez is the 3rd fight down on the prelims, for God's sake. The Alexander Rakic, an eliminating bout on the title side in light heavyweight. Those are 2 top 5 fighters. Lightweight, Islam Makhachev and Drew Dober. Islam's hype train. Will it be derailed by Dober, that wily veteran, been around a long time? Remember, he fought CB Dalloway on the Ultimate Fighter show, and that's a long time ago. So when I look at those 2 fights to kick it off, those are great fights in their own right. I mean, Santos and Rakic could be a headlining fight on a fight night and probably do a lot better than last night's co-main or main event, especially the co-main, same division. Then you have Jan versus Sterling is the co-main. The co-main. Let me say that again. And then Amanda Nunez and Megan Anderson. The odds were, last I heard, Amanda Nunez a 12-1 favorite, minus 1,200. And then Israel Adesanya, the greatest middleweight in the world, undisputed in that regard, moving up to light heavyweight in a thin division to face Jan Blachowicz, who earned his way to that belt, fight by fight by fight by fight. And with Jones vacating it, Blachowicz the champ, Adesanya the middleweight champ, 4 champions, 3 title fights, UFC 259 next Saturday in Vegas.
It's a crazy fight card, man. 3 title fights, as you said, champ. That's those odds are crazy. Those odds are crazy. And look, I've got to tell you, whenever you said those odds to me, all I thought of was Mike Tyson, Buster Douglas. Is Amanda Nunez sandwiched between 2 title fights and not the headline and fighting somebody that everybody writes off? Is this the perfect opportunity to cash in big on Megan Anderson? I think that the only way Amanda Nunez loses is if she looks past Megan. But that's the hardest part of being a champion. And I think that's why John Jones is going to heavyweight, is because he needed the motivation. Is Amanda Nunez motivated to fight Megan Anderson? Man, those odds are crazy. How do you not just throw down $100 on Megan Anderson just for the hell of it, right? I mean, just in case something happened.
Just in case. Yep. Sorry, Jeff, just in case. Slip. Yeah, no, Amanda could slip. Well, Holly Holm has beaten Megan Anderson, and that was in 2018 at UFC 225. Felicia Spencer submitted her in May of 2019, and Spencer, of course, Amanda beat her the last time she fought in June. Amanda's a parent now. She's beaten everybody in her way at bantamweight and featherweight, running out of people to fight. I don't think she's the type who starts to believe the hype train too much, but when I look at, what Megan Anderson's been able to do, I mean, her last 2 fights, she's won by submission and knockout. She's got a great skill set, and it is at 45. Amanda's naturally a 35er. So, the one thing that you used to say about Amanda Nunez, and she squashed that over the years, is if you get past the first round, you have a great chance against her. Well, that used to be the case, right? And then when she destroyed Miesha Tate and Ronda Rousey and Cyborg all in the first round. But when you look at what Amanda Nunez has done in her last 2 fights, the one glimmer of hope that fighters had going in is that she would gas out and you could beat her. Well, ask Jermaine Durandamy and ask Felicia Spencer, both of whom Amanda badly beat by unanimous decision in her last 2 fights. Amanda Nunez gas tank is there now. So there are no weaknesses. She's great on the feet, electric on the feet. She's incredible on the ground. Her jiu-jitsu is on point. What chance does Megan Anderson have in this fight? Because you look at the other ones, Jan and Sterling. I mean, jiu-jitsu and striking of Sterling. Jan so well-rounded all the way across the board. Blachowicz and Adesanya, both incredible kickboxers. Jan's got more Muay Thai. That fight, you're looking at that matchup there. But what chance does Megan Anderson have against Nunez? Where do you see a possibility for her?
Nowhere. Look, but this is a fight. Look, it's with 12 to 1 odds. This is what I'm saying. Vitor Belfort beat Randy Couture because the glove cut Randy's eye, right? We've had fighters blow an ACL out in the middle of a fight, lose that fight because of an injury. I'm just saying with those odds, man, I'm throwing $100 down on Megan Anderson just because Amanda Nunez might slip on the way out. She might, break a toe. She might get an injury during that fight. Heaven forbid her overlook Megan Anderson. And look, that's not in Amanda's nature. That would be really out of character for Amanda Nunez. But we've seen it happen to fighters. Like when I worry more, I'll say this. I know that Amanda Nunez gets up for Valentina fights, right? I know that she gets up for Cyborg fights. If ever there was a fight presented to her where she might not get up for, I feel like this is the one. Like maybe
it is a shame though, Jeff. Go ahead, Jeff. I'm sorry. If she's ever going to look past anyone, you're saying?
Yeah, it's Megan. I mean, she's a former Invicta champion. Yeah, but I think that the stars could align, man. For 12, actually what I'm seeing, Jim, is 12 to 1 odds. And I'm thinking, my God, I want to make money.
No, and think about this. She's beaten Durandamy twice, but look at the people. She's beaten Valentina Shevchenko twice. She destroyed Miesha Tate. She crushed Ronda Rousey. She took the soul from Cyborg. I mean, she Holly Holm with the head kick and then the finish. She has beaten every single legend in her way, and she has laid waste to every single one of them. Besides Valentina, every single one of them. And Valentina she beat twice, and they were both by decision. The second time was a split. First time was unanimous, if I'm remembering correctly. But when I think back on the career of Amanda Nunez, I'm going to think about all those legends. But right now, there's no one left. Holly Holm could end up getting another because Holly's winning again. There could be another Holm Nunez fight because there's nobody left for her to fight. So how do you continuously get up and get up and get up? And the end of her career, the tail end here, someone needs to step up and become some sort of a rival for Amanda. There has to be someone. And look, how many times have we seen it? No one thought Holly Holm was going to beat Ronda Rousey. No one thought Derek Lewis was going to beat Curtis Blades. There have been very few times in UFC history when you've seen a bigger underdog than Megan Anderson. She has a chance to be famous for the rest of her life right now. And you can never discount that. These are pro athletes. These are great fighters. It's just that Amanda Nunez has been so damn good, no one gives anybody a chance now when they fight her.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, I think that John Jones, maybe why he's going to heavyweight, might just have to do with, man, he's burnt out at light heavyweight. Yeah. He's not getting up for these fights. It was easy to get up for Shogun and Machida and Rashad and all these legends, right?
And DC, now that right?
Yeah. And now that the legends are gone, it's hard to get up to fight Jan, right? And so, but what he does get motivated for is heavyweight. He has no choice but to get motivated. And so that's where I kind of go back to Amanda. Is Amanda as motivated as she used to be? Do I think Amanda has to be 100% motivated to beat Megan Anderson? Nope. No, I don't. I think she needs to come in at least 80% to beat her. But these are the fights that scare me. Like whenever I look at a legend like Amanda Nunez, it's the fight that no one thought you're going to win or no one thought you're going to lose. That's usually the one that jumps up and bites you in the ass. And that's why I said Tyson, brought up the Tyson fight with Buster Douglas. I can't see Megan Anderson winning this fight, but with those odds, I raise an eyebrow, and then so I start talking myself into, well, how can Megan win this fight? Amanda's going to overlook her. I don't know that any of that's going to happen, but with those odds, man, if you have a 50, if you have $20 laying around, it's worth throwing it on there.
Yeah, no doubt. And, Pablo says Megan's chance if Amanda goes to jail after the beating that she would give her, or Amanda, like, let's say Amanda smashes her hand and her wrist is dangling limp. Remember when Jones
Yeah.
had the toe against Chael? And
Oh.
if Jones would have, yeah, so Chael would have won by, but, or if Anthony Smith would have taken the illegal knee and won the belt
Mhm.
against John Jones. But Pablo says no one thought Lewis would beat Blades. Excuse me, sir. What I meant by that is Lewis was a one of the biggest underdogs in UFC history in that fight against
Yeah.
Curtis Blades. And if you had bet Derek Lewis, you would have won a shit ton of money. And Jesus from America, or Jesus, whichever one you prefer, says I did. But that being said, Jeff, I look, Amanda Nunez is just in that category. The sun comes up, you pay your taxes, and Amanda Nunez kicks everyone's ass. That's pretty much where she's at right now. We talked about Jan and Sterling. That's a great matchup right there. Nunez and Anderson. Before we wrap it up here on Fallout and we turn the corner into next week, and we have all kinds of shows coming your way, subscribe, like, bell, all that for us, please. MMA Weekly, Gries and Cain right here with UFC Fallout. The main event next week, the light heavyweight champion, Jan Blachowicz. I interviewed him last year in Albuquerque. It took me 5 minutes and about 100 times to say his name right. Blachowicz, right? And I told him he's one of my favorite fighters because he knocked Luke Rockhold out, and everyone who knocks Luke Rockhold out is one of my favorite fighters, and I'm not alone in that. But let me just say, this guy has taken the long way there. He's fought so many times. I mean, look, in KSW, in IFMA, in Muay Thai. I mean, just thinking about what he's done and how many UFC fights. Jan Blachowicz made his UFC debut, and I want to make sure I get this right. So UFC 191 was his third fight. So Fight Night, Nelson versus Story in 2014 was his UFC debut. He's been around forever. Wasn't even a title contender until, the Rockhold fight, because he had lost to Thiago Santos in 2019 in a fight that, Thiago used as a springboard to fight Jones for the title that summer. But I was there when he knocked out Corey Anderson. He barely beat Jacare before that in a split decision, and then he dominated Dominic Reyes. Now, Adesanya has been dominant from the second he stepped foot into the octagon. Marvin Vettori and Kelvin Gastelum were got his win against Heine. Adesanya has beaten Costa. He's beaten Whitaker. He's beaten Gastelum. The only thing for him to do, and with a thin division at 205, was move up and try to take the belt from Jan, the belt that was once owned by John Jones and Daniel Cormier, with no one else having a real shot to even win it. Now it's wide open. Is he coming up to fight Jan in the main event? Izzy's not gaining the weight to do it. He's going to fight at about 193. He's going to weigh in. Interesting to see how Adesanya does against Blachowicz, but they're two just world-class strikers.
Yeah, it's an interesting fight. I think that a lot of people are probably picking Izzy in that fight, but I don't know. I'm on the fence with that one. I got to watch a lot of video and look at it, because Jan's a tough matchup, man. He's a tough matchup for everybody, including Izzy. But Izzy also, what he is good at is it's hard to deal with. Does he have the power that he has at 85, at 205 pounds? There's a lot of unanswered questions in that, heading into that fight. I'm definitely looking forward to it, though. That's the main event. That's the one that we're all signing up for. That's the one we're buying along with the other two. But that's the big boy fight. I don't know, Jim. We'll do the preview show on that, and I guess we'll give predictions there. But right now, I'm kind of on the fence on who's going to win that fight.
Yeah, and you have a couple of flyweights who are definitely, wanting to put themselves in the mix as well, with Kai Kara-France. That is on, and Kai Kara-France, let me look at here. He is number 8 in the flyweight rankings, and he's the 4th fight down on the prelims. So you've got, a guy who's looking to be a contender at flyweight, and then you have Benavidez in the next fight against Askarov, and then you have Kyler Phillips, a top prospect at bantamweight, against Song Yadong, another one. That's a really good fight there. Dominic Cruz headlines the prelims against Casey Kenny. Santos and Rakic, Islam and Dober, Jan and Sterling, Nunez, Anderson, Blachowicz, and Adesanya. Jeff, which fight are you looking forward to the most on that card besides the title fights?
Ooh, besides the title fights. I'm actually looking forward to the main event with Cruz and Kenny. Can Kenny steal this show? 'Cause I think he's being, if I'm him and I'm his camp, I'm telling him the UFC's setting you up to you lose to Dominic Cruz. You're a stepping stone, Yeah. But you have an opportunity to shut this shit down and head into the main card by beating a legend. And so I'm really looking forward to how, and plus I want to see how Dominic looks. That's what it is for me. Are we past the time of Dominic Cruz looking like Dominic Cruz in the cage? Because his injuries and his fighting style are so hard to overcome because he relies on mobility. He relies on footwork. Well, it's his knees that keep going out, And so at one point, Dominic Cruz is not going to be able to do what Dominic Cruz has been traditionally able to do. And that fight interests me a lot for those reasons. I think Kenny has a great opportunity, and I want to see, is Dominic Cruz still Dominic Cruz, or are those days gone? Have we moved past the Dominic Cruz era in the lighter weight classes, or is he still relevant?
Casey Kenny and Megan Anderson, who has the bigger opportunity? That's just, Megan because of the belt and because it's Nunez, but Kenny against Cruz, Anderson against Amanda Nunez, two just relative, and Anderson's unknown, and Kenny for sure coming out of nowhere. Man, that's crazy. The MMA Lab has Mario Batista, Kyler Phillips, and Casey Kenny on this card, the new guard. They all train with Sean O'Malley. Benson Henderson, half owner of that gym, producing top talent, and so many huge opportunities next week. Sterling finally gets his shot. Adesanya moving up for Jan Blachowicz, who gets the big-time fight against the big-time opponent with all the attention on him in that main event after fighting Anderson and Dominic Reyes. Unbelievable next week, Jeff. Now, out of the three title fights, which one are you looking forward to the most?
Man, I want to say the main event. I really do, because it's Izzy, and it's champion versus champion. But it's Sterling and Jan. Sterling and Jan, man. I think that fight's going to be fight of the night. I think that fight's going to be insane. So that's the one.
Yeah, no, look, he's only a blue belt in jiu-jitsu, speaking of Jan. It's easy for me to say, but he's a Muay Thai and a boxer, so the striking phenomenal. Sterling's going to want to take this down and use the jiu-jitsu for sure, but he's really good on the feet as well. He's been in all the fights, all the wars. Jan has too. That one has epic written all over it. That one has fight of the night written all over it for sure. And Blachowicz and Izzy could easily be that. Adesanya could literally destroy Blachowicz and then lay claim to being pound for pound number one and say, I'm the best in the world. Somebody come prove it otherwise, John Jones. So interesting, right? Tim says, what up, Cain and Greasy? Aljo and Jan is the fight he's looking forward to. Jesus from America, or Jesus from America, says legendary Polish power, Jan Blachowicz. I just want to say his name 1,000 times, but this fight card coming up is incredible, guys, and we have the preview show coming up Friday. The weigh-ins will be streamed live on MMA Weekly, of course. We have all the shows coming your way. The live stream on Saturday night. We'll be here every step of the way with MMA Weekly, and then the Fallout next Sunday. Jeff, final thoughts on UFC Fallout, powered by CBD Emporium, featuring Level Select CBD, coming off those big-time heavyweight fights over the last few weeks, coming off what we now are using to lean into UFC 259, and the UFC wants to forget about last night as soon as possible. But your final thoughts as we head into UFC 259 fight week.
My thoughts are, look, the last several events, we've got the heavyweight division sort of shaken out a little bit at the top. We've shook some fleas loose that are going to be back not in tighter contention, and other people rose. What's going to happen at UFC 259 is we're talking about pound for pound rankings on the line. We're talking about pound for pound rankings. And I think that the UFC does a disservice not putting the women in there. There's only going to be 3 women in the top 15 pound for pound. It's Valentina, Amanda, and Wei Li. But I wish that they would just combine them, because I think Amanda Nunez is the number 2 fighter in the world. That's the number 2 pound for pound fighter in the world, if you ask me. Period. And maybe Valentina would be 3 or 4, even over the men. But I think that we're going to have a lot of things happen in the pound for pound rankings. If Izzy wins, he's a 2-division champion. He's going to jump in those rankings. He's going to pass some people. If just crazy stuff can go on. If Amanda, God forbid, loses, she plummets in the pound for pound rankings. But I don't know who passes her. How does Valentina clearly pass her when she's lost her twice? I feel like all of these events leading up have been nice as far as divisional clarity. UFC 259 is about legacy. It's about legends. It's about pound for pound, ranking. So I think it's a bigger deal, more implications on the line.
So many implications on the line at UFC 259. We'll be talking about it all week right here on MMA Weekly, on YouTube, on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, everywhere we are. follow us because we are taking over the game in 2021. We have all kinds of new programming popping up every week, and we are on site for all these events. The MMA Weekly camera is front and center. This is UFC Fallout on MMA Weekly, powered by CBD Emporium, featuring Level Select CBD, helping you stay in the fight of life, day in and day out. Let's be real. The athletes are competing in the octagon. The rest of us are competing every single day to be the best versions of ourselves and to succeed in this crazy world. You want every advantage you can get, right? Well, Level Select CBD will help give you that by taking away your pain, by helping you with stress and anxiety, and by helping you sleep better at night. No doubt about that. And right now you get 50% off of Level Select and CBD Emporium products just because we love you, just because you know us, just because we got the hookup. Holler if you hear us, right? CBD Emporium and Level Select CBD products, 50% off with the code MMA50 at StayInTheFightMMA.com. StayInTheFightMMA.com, the code MMA50, Level Select CBD. Stay in the fight. We appreciate you guys staying in the fight with us, man. The chat room warriors, love you guys. The diehards on Sundays, always here for Fallout and all the other shows that we do. We appreciate you, the greatest fans of mixed martial arts, for following everything we do here on MMA Weekly. Subscribe, like, hit that bell, keep that algorithm going in our favor. More and more people seeing our content here on the most trusted source in news and entertainment in mixed martial arts for almost 20 years. MMA Weekly. Great content coming your way this week as we turn the corner into UFC 259, and we will be here with you at MMA Weekly. We can promise you that. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for everyone at MMA Weekly, including our website people who do a great job, Ken and Jeff and Hunter and everybody writing there, and all of our production team. I'm Jim Grieshaber. Call me Gries, saying thank you so much for being with us, and we'll talk to you soon. Keep your game tight and your mind right. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday, people. We're out.